Ghost of Tsushima was one of the greatest narratives in video game history. But there is a chance that Ghost of Yotei will throw it all away, trying to be late to the DEI zeitgeist.
Wait a second. Before you go grabbing your pitchforks and bonfire supplies, hear me out for a second.
Oh, crap. My liberal friends are gonna disown me after this. What do I mean by DEI zeitgeist?
What the hell was even that?
Zeitgeist meaning the defining spirit or mood of a particular period of history. DEI meaning diversity, equity, and inclusion. On paper, DEI seems like a good idea. In practice, it means the voices that are the most thoughtful and elucidating don't have the most weight. Rather, it's the ones that are simply the most intersectional. The ones that check off the most amount of boxes. Echo is the prime example of what I'm talking about. By any critical examination, it was a mess and a poorly crafted show. Poorly written characters, poorly choreographed fights, poor storytelling as a whole.
Here we go!
But you're just a filthy conservative-leaning individual, Ben Fred.
Well, what did the New York Times think?
It sets up a tug-of-war between an action thriller imperative and a cultural historical imperative that ends up as a losing battle for both sides.
Oh dear, they agree with me.
Echo often feels like it's unraveling within itself and before our eyes, sometimes becoming a mess of threads that continue to become tangled as the episodes go on. 7 out of 10.
Not a great show. Critics didn't really like it. And audiences especially didn't like it. Oh, but what does this guy who gave it a 10 out of 10 say?
Echo was decent.
The highest critic score it got on Metacritic was from the AV Club. 91. Almost a perfect score. What did they have to say about it?
It feels genuinely special that Marvel is introducing a hero here, who is a deaf Native American woman who uses a prosthetic leg.
They gave it a 91 not because of the story, or writing, or dialogue, or action, but because there were many boxes checked. This is DEI, when the story is no longer the objective, but the check boxes are. Now, I want to make clear, I don't dislike Echo because it has a deaf Native American woman with a prosthetic as the lead. I think it's genuinely impressive what Alakwa Cox has done here. I think she's leading a strong life and overcoming extreme adversity. But DEI tells you virtue isn't how you act, but a product of attributes you cannot change. In my opinion, the entire point of life is to change, one day at a time, for the better.
And you know I'm gonna say this, and I wanted to try to say this nicely, but I don't know that I can. When you are consumed with these superficial identity characteristics, and they are at the forefront of your brain at all times, and this is how you view your identity, this is what you consume yourself with, sometimes other parts of your personality and your morality fall by the wayside, and you don't have time to develop those parts of yourself.
Nobody quite says it like Amala says it. Wait a second, she's a conservative leading individual who is black and a woman?
No. It's not true. That's impossible!
Now keep in mind that my most recent video was raving about the great story and characters of a game called Flintlock. A game where the protagonist is a black woman. Just keep that tucked up in your brain cage. Just tuck it up there. Just keep it up there tucked. I love video games. I love video game stories. I love video game characters. I want interesting and well-told narratives. But when you just stuff in diversity for the sake of diversity, inclusion for the sake of inclusion, and equity because you don't understand how statistics work, your game, your story, and your characters are all going to suffer. But if I think Ghost of Tsushima was one of the greatest games ever, which I do, why would I be worried about the sequel? Because Sony has established a trend. Spider-Man to Spider-Man 2.
Mamma mia!
Last of Us to Last of Us 2. Horizon to Horizon 2. God of War Ragnarok luckily just told the completion of the story it was establishing in the first one, with no ham-fisting. And if somebody jumps onto the comments and says, but Angrboda was black even though it's a Nordic story, that didn't bother me in the slightest. The game was impeccable and that character was both well-acted and well-written. But when the characters are intentionally designed to look unappealing for DEI's sake, or the writing becomes 100% didactic, or the character now just doesn't make any sense because they were ham-fisted into a story just so that there could be some diversity, just so that we could reflect the 2024 current zeitgeist, it's now homework to participate in the video game. Concord is the most recent example from Sony. I saw a YouTube video in the Death of a Game series on Concord. I like the Death of a Game series. It's a comprehensive deep dive into why games went offline and stopped being supported by developers. Great stuff. But he was totally illogical in parts of his analysis of Concord. Concord was a slow-moving, generic-looking, uninteresting video game.
Holy... This might actually be the slowest movement I've ever seen in my life. It's like I'm on a treadmill.
Me and millions of other people saw the gameplay trailer and checked out. Then, when we got to see more about the characters, we checked out even farther. Unappealing, uninteresting, and only designed the way they are because it fits, you guessed it, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Nerdslayer Studios has this to say about the characters.
Sorry, a fat rounded character, as in most of her armor is also round, and her belly is not exciting to look at nor play as, and doesn't motivate me or many players to do anything either. You can do so many other variants of the same idea, like Zarya or Ayla the Huntress in Skyrim. There isn't anything wrong with being a big, strong girl, but Daw or Duchess doesn't look big or strong. They look like you could roll them off of a cliff. And sorry, we're talking professional criminals here. In a competitive shooter environment, it's so hard to stomach so much of that. I mean, I'll just self-insert here and say that, like, my grandma grew up on the farms of Minnesota and in the south of Texas, and was way tougher looking or acting than any of the characters throughout this entire game, like Daw or Duchess.
Yes! That's 100% accurate to why people are annoyed about DEI. No notes. And if someone really was getting mad simply by the mere presence of black people included in a game, they can be launched into the sun for all I care. But then he has this to say about DEI.
But the second thing that I will defend is this lazy and fairly idiotic narrative surrounding the game and its team to an extent, that it's somehow being woke and DEI or diversity, equity, and inclusion filled is what made the game fail above all else. And me not pointing that out means that I'm the shill. Go woke, go broke. Then why do all major corporations have LGBTQ+ pushes, little pins and flags? Because even if they are just being performative and they don't support the rights of humans, they aren't stupid enough to fully alienate paying audiences because they can make money off of them.
Bud Light, dude. Bud Light.
The company reported second quarter North American revenue plunged $395 million. AB InBev indicated the reason was primarily due to the volume decline of Bud Light after Mulvaney was hired to promote the beer.
You ever heard of Target? Why do you want a company to be preaching at you? The easy way to tell if it's egregious or not is to switch it out for Christianity. What if McDonald's did a Christianity awareness segment? I bet a lot of people would be annoyed about it. You want corporations wearing Christianity like a mask? I bet most people, even Christians, would say no, absolutely not. Myself included. So why are you so thrilled when they're wearing DEI as a mask? It's not real or authentic. Why is there this old, decrepit-looking woman instead of Tracer? Diversity. Why is this character aggressively rotund? Inclusion. Why is this specimen so bulbous? Equity. Why does the knife-wielding assassin look like they just came from a drag show? It's completely throwing out 100 years of character design wisdom. But wisdom isn't what governed these designs. DEI governed the designs. We can't be excluding fat people in our representation, or old people, or unattractive people. We don't have any characters that make sense to be patterned after a drag performer. the knife assassin, maybe? Yeah, sure, just, make it the knife person. You can see what I mean when I say DEI. The governing principle in design for this character was not a knife-wielding assassin. That was just an afterthought. The governing principle was diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's DEI. DEI isn't just having diversity and inclusion. It's when the governing principle becomes diversity. So the narrative or the character or the story suffers and it no longer feels true or authentic. It feels didactic. And why would you go out of your way to make this person look authentically decrepit? This is insane. Concord cost an estimated $400 million to make, and they literally refunded everyone who bought it and shut it down after only 2 weeks. You can't say things like,
but a robot having pronouns is kind of funny to me, because all sci-fi IPs have the ability to gender your robot to an extent. That's what modulators are for. What a totally idiotic and also ignorant thing that you would also have ignored popular media to have missed already to take issue with then, and then blame a game's failure on is cartoonish.
Mr. Nerd Slayer Studios, do you think robots having pronouns helped? For you to ignore the fact that the most DEI character designs in any shooter in history failed faster than any other game in history, that is what is cartoonish. Diversity is great. Inclusion is great. Equity is a stupid idea, best summarized by this drawing from After School's video titled, Why Smart People Believe Stupid Things.
Wokeism reduces the world down to simplistic oppressor-victim relations, in which people who are white, straight, slim, or male are the oppressors, while those who are non-white, LGBT, fat, or female are victims. Wokeists typically reject claims of objectivity as a weapon created by straight white men to enforce the dominant, cis-heteronormative, patriarchal, white supremacist worldview. As such, they believe that the purpose of scholarship is not to determine truth but to promote social justice, or as they call it, diversity, equity, and inclusion. To this end, they will often use their intelligence to persuade people of arguments that are logically unsound, but which are perceived to contribute to a more equitable world.
I think diversity and inclusion are good things, but being wholly inauthentic just to be diverse and inclusive means your characters and your writing is going to be inauthentic and not believable. A super criminal anti-hero who is so fat they shouldn't functionally be able to run is going to chafe against my sense of reality. I already made a whole video about this, but Spider-Man 2 had one of the most dramatic and impressive main campaigns I've seen ever. I love Peter Parker and I love Miles Morales. My favorite movie currently is 2018's Into the Spider-Verse. I really enjoy Miles as a character and his story, and dang it if this isn't the most coolest, most stylish looking movie ever created. Peter and Miles' stories are insanely excellent in Spider-Man 2. But the game went from Miles' dad being a hero who serves his community as a police officer, stopping criminals and saving the day, to Peter being racked with guilt because he sent so many murderous criminals to prison. He stole their freedom by sending them to prison. Peter is essentially a superpowered police officer. Same with Miles. But Spider-Man 2 retcons all the murderous villains into sympathetic victims almost without exception. I got a whole video on that. Go ahead and watch that video. That's a pretty good video. You should watch it. Why did they pull such an Uno reverse from Spider-Man to Spider-Man 2? Because the video game wasn't liberal enough. It wasn't progressive enough. And this isn't even my own thoughts. I heard this from an employee working at the company. He literally said that in meetings they would ask the team for ideas about how they can make the game more progressive because it wasn't progressive enough. And the writing suffered. Suddenly, the most interesting and intense villain became the least interesting and most ridiculous farce. How do we signal that Spider-Man is good? Because he didn't put the criminal in jail. Police are bad. Criminals are just misunderstood. The guiding principle was not compelling villain or completion of a character arc. It was insert current year, thoughts on police and prison. And the characters and the narrative suffered. Not exactly DEI, but it's the same idea. Similar thing with The Last of Us and The Last of Us 2. Girl kills the main character from the previous game, but we want to see that she's virtuous. How do we signal her virtue? What if she befriends a transgender person? Perfect writing. We've done it again. You can't hate Abby if she's befriending transgender people. It's against the rules. Now everyone's gonna love Abby, right? Everybody loves Abby.
No, dude. No. 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 I don't care about her.
See, and now we're in this area where we gotta start feeling sorry for Abby because her dad got killed by Joel. Heck no!
How am I getting over this fence?
Hopefully you fall and break your neck.
No. You do not. No. No. Alright, can I pick up the gun and shoot myself? How do I do that?
In the Last of Us universe, death is always around the corner. Starvation, violence, sickness, literal zombies infesting the whole world. You ever heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs? The idea is that you can't really work on the next level if you're having major problems with the previous level. And you can't do anything about any of it if you don't have the bottom two secured. War, death, violence, zombies. Worrying about which gender your tendencies more closely align with is the last thing you would consider in a zombie apocalypse. It does not make sense. It's totally inauthentic to the scenario. Oh, a zombie is trying to consume my face. People are constantly dying around me and trying to kill me. I have no idea where my next meal will come from. Suddenly, wondering if I'm a tomboy or a transgender person is not at the top of my list of worries. So why did the character get written, even if it's inauthentic? Because diversity, equity, and inclusion. The natural conclusion of DEI is that anything not diverse enough is immoral. This was a clip that made me laugh.
Hello, I'm from Denmark, and it's a pleasure to be here. So you're a little bit into it. This is a cast and a Danish production, which is entirely Nordic. It therefore has some lack of diversity, you would say, as also new rules are implied in Hollywood.
What are you on to?
Sorry, but
from the get-go.
Just curious, it's not because of artistic reasons, it's because of lack of diversity that this can't compete in that competition. Are you worried about that?
Are you? I don't understand the question.
Okay.
Well, first of all, the film takes place in Denmark in the 1750s.
Yeah.
Now, this is pretty funny, but I think this journalist wasn't trying to call them out, which Mads assumed that they were. I think they were trying to make the point that being an almost entirely Danish cast meant they were ineligible for competing the Oscars. Making a Danish film with a Danish cast, according to DEI, is evil, and therefore ineligible to compete in the Oscars. The Lord of the Rings trilogy, written by a European guy during a primarily European war almost 100 years ago, didn't have black women in it.
Thank you so much, Angelique, for noticing and acknowledging the fact that this is the first time that we see a woman and the first time that we see a black woman in this area and this world and these works of Tolkien. You know, this is necessary. This is a revolutionary moment for cinematic and television.
Is it necessary that a 100-year-old story by a European man have a black woman dwarf in it? According to DEI, it is necessary. Tolkien wrote an evil story that had no black women in it. So it's necessary for us in 2024 to correct this evil.
This is necessary.
Which leads us to Ghost of Yotei. If the trend is away from authenticity and checking boxes at all costs, does Ghost of Yotei have a chance? Or is it going to ham-fist the current narrative into a video game set in 1603? As soon as I saw that the lead character was a woman, I felt a little trepidatious. You misogynist!
Wait a second. Your most recent video was about how much you loved the character and voice acting of a black woman protagonist. You are ideologically inconsistent.
Or, hear me out, having a woman as a protagonist swordmaster in a 1603 historical drama makes zero sense. Even my liberal friend, who is a huge Ghost of Tsushima fan, immediately said, uh-oh, I'm a little worried about this. Is she going to be a real character, or did they just pick that character for equity's sake?
This is necessary.
Will she just be virtuous by virtue of being a woman? Will the full story experience be about how put upon she is as a woman? Will she hate all men always and collect a ragtag group of only women to help her kill a bunch of only men? Or is it 2024 and we've stopped phoning in stories with such half-thought cliches? A ton of these modern strong female protagonists are just written like they're unlikable men. Echo, Captain Marvel, Aloy.
The goddess.
There is no goddess. I told you that already.
Abby. Some great strong female protagonists would be Lara Croft in the reboot, Nora Vanek from Flintlock, Senua, Jesse Faden. But PlayStation has a track record here with their studios of neglecting the story in favor of the zeitgeist. There is a high likelihood, according to the trends, that the protagonist in Ghost of Yotei will be written as an unlikable man, but played by a woman. And that would be doing a severe injustice to this amazing series. Maybe they'll surprise me, and she will be written as a woman. And the nuance and intrigue of being a woman in these trying times will be a fascinating story. Maybe it's the men writers who are making such unlikable women. Is that it? But it seems like women writers gravitate to this sort of thing as well. My roommate told me a story of how when he was getting his master's degree in college, he wrote a character, and the character was written exactly as a man. Then he just changed all the pronouns and references, so now it was a woman in the piece. He presented it to the class and they all praised him for writing such a powerful and strong woman. And 80% of his class was women. All I'm really hoping for is that they don't do that with Ghost of Yotei. I'm scared that the game will play great, but the story will get sacrificed on the altar of DEI. Let's hope for the best.